March 17, 1943. Deep in a bunker beneath occupied Belgium, a team of German intelligence officers intercepted a coded Allied transmission they weren't supposed to find. What they decrypted that night wasn't evidence of enemy weakness or vulnerable supply lines. It was something far more terrifying. Undeniable proof that the Third Reich was facing an industrial and technological juggernaut it could never match. This is the true story of Operation Seidler, the bizarre intelligence mission that convinced even the most loyal German officers that the war was already lost, 18 months before D-Day. What they discovered in those intercepted messages changed everything. This story will shock you. If you love untold Wyatt history, intelligence operations, and the truth behind Nazi Germany's downfall, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and turn on notifications. Share this incredible true story. Comment. What lesser-known OPU story should we cover next? Lieutenant Klaus Richter was not a typical Wehrmacht officer. At 34 years old, he was older than most of his rank, with wire-rimmed glasses that gave him the appearance of a university professor rather than a soldier. In truth, that's exactly what he had been before the war, a mathematics lecturer at the University of Heidelberg with a specialty in cryptography and signal analysis. When the war broke out in 1939, Richter's mathematical mind made him too valuable for frontline combat. Instead, he was assigned to the Funkabwehr, the German Radio Defense and Signals Intelligence Service. By March 1943, he commanded Station Belgien 7, a signals intercept facility hidden in the basement of what had once been a textile factory in the town of Mons, Belgium. The facility was unremarkable from the outside. The factory above still operated, producing uniforms for the Wehrmacht. But below ground, behind steel doors and concrete walls, 23 specialists worked in shifts monitoring Allied radio communications. Their equipment, banks of radio receivers, recording devices, and cipher machines, represented some of the most advanced technology the Reich possessed. Richter's team had been moderately successful over the past year. They had intercepted and decoded several British military communications, provided intelligence on Allied convoy movements, and once even cracked a low-level American diplomatic code. But nothing they had discovered was particularly significant. Mostly, it was routine traffic, unit movements, supply requests, weather reports. That was about to change. March 17, 1943 started like any other day at Station Belgien 7. Richter arrived at 0600 hours, descending the metal stairs into the bunker, where his night shift was concluding their watch. Sergeant Franz Weber, the night watch commander, looked exhausted but excited. "Herr Leutnant," Weber said immediately, standing as Richter entered. "We have something unusual." Richter set down his briefcase. "Show me." Weber led him to the main monitoring station, where Corporal Dieter Hoffmann sat hunched over a radio receiver, headphones clamped over his ears. Hoffmann was their best radio operator. He could distinguish between different Allied transmitter fingerprints and often identified the source of a transmission before the message was even decoded. At 0342 hours, Weber explained, Hoffmann picked up a transmission on a frequency we've been monitoring for weeks. British, we think, but using an entirely new encryption pattern. Not their standard military code. Something different. How different? Richter asked, his interest piqued. Different enough that our initial analysis suggests it's not military at all. It might be intelligence service, possibly MI6, or something else entirely. Richter leaned over Hoffmann's shoulder. "What makes you think it's intelligence rather than military?" "The transmission protocol, sir," Hoffmann replied without looking up. "Military communications follow strict timing and frequency patterns. This was irregular, and the power signature suggests it came from a high-grade transmitter, much more powerful than standard field equipment. Where did it originate?" "That's the strange part, sir," Weber interjected. "Based on signal strength and direction finding, we believe it came from inside London itself, not from a military installation, from somewhere in the city center." That was indeed unusual. By 1943, the Germans knew the locations of most British military communication centers, but transmissions from London's city center, that suggested either a diplomatic channel or something from the intelligence services. "Was it a one-time transmission?" Richter asked. "No, sir. It repeated 3 times over a 30-minute period. Same message each time. That's protocol for high-priority communications. Send it multiple times to ensure receipt." Richter felt his pulse quicken. A repeated high-priority message using non-standard encryption. This was exactly the kind of thing the Abwehr, German military intelligence, had been hoping to intercept. Have we attempted decryption? Preliminary only, Weber said. It's not any cipher we recognize immediately. But based on the message structure, I believe it's breakable. It will just take time. How much time? Weber shrugged. Hours, maybe days. Depends on whether they're using a book cipher, polyalphabetic substitution, or something mechanical like Typex. Richter made a decision. Wake everyone up, cancel all leave. I want our entire cryptanalysis team on this immediately. And get me Captain Muller from Abwehr headquarters on the secure line. He needs to know about this. Tertiary crew in Part 2. The cryptanalysis begins by 0900 hours. Station Belgian 7 was a hive of activity. The entire day shift had been called in early, and the exhausted night shift had been asked to stay. The message, now designated Intercept Seidler, Sea Eagle, had been transcribed, copied, and distributed to every cryptanalyst on the team. Captain Heinrich Müller arrived from Brussels at 1100 hours. Müller was Richter's superior officer, a career intelligence man who had worked in signals intelligence since before the war. He was also a committed Nazi Party member, which Richter was decidedly not. The two men had a professional but cool relationship. Richter, Müller said as he descended into the bunker, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he always used. What's so important that you pull me away from a planning session with the commandant? Richter handed him the transcribed message. This, sir, intercepted this morning from London. High priority, repeated transmission, non-standard encryption. Müller scanned the paper, his eyes narrowing. Even in its encrypted form, the message had a certain weight to it. Military communications had a distinctive rhythm and structure that experienced intelligence officers could recognize even before decryption. Interesting, Müller admitted. What do we know about it? British origin. Almost certainly intelligence services rather than military. Transmitted from central London using high-power equipment. The message is approximately 800 groups long, which suggests substantial content. Have you made any progress on decryption? Some, Richter replied. He led Müller to a table where three of his cryptanalysts, Oberleutnant Hans Vogel, Sergeant Ernst Bauer, and civilian consultant Dr. Wilhelm Schmidt, were working. Dr. Schmidt looked up. Schmidt was in his 60s, a former professor of linguistics who had been drafted into wartime service because of his expertise in English and French. He had gray hair, rheumy eyes, and the permanent stoop of someone who had spent too many years hunched over books. Herr Hauptmann, Schmidt acknowledged Müller with a brief nod. We have made some progress. The cipher is complex but not unbreakable. It appears to be a modified Playfair system with additional polyalphabetic elements. Can you break it? Müller asked bluntly. Yes, Schmidt replied with confidence. But it will take time. We need to identify the key. I estimate another 12 to 18 hours. Müller looked at Richter. Make it 12. I want to know what this message says before I report to Berlin. Part 3. Breakthrough. The team worked through the day and into the night. They tried frequency analysis, examining which letter combinations appeared most often. They looked for patterns that might indicate repeated words. They tested various potential keys based on common phrases or dates. It was exhausting, mind-numbing work. Cryptanalysis in 1943 was not aided by computers. It was pure human intelligence, pattern recognition, and educated guessing. Hours of tedious analysis for small breakthroughs. Richter stayed throughout, bringing coffee to his team, offering encouragement, occasionally making suggestions. He watched Dr. Schmidt work with particular fascination. The old professor had a method that seemed almost intuitive. He would stare at the encrypted text for long periods, muttering to himself, occasionally making small notes. At 2130 hours, Schmidt suddenly sat upright. I have it, he said quietly. Everyone stopped. Richter crossed the room quickly. You broke it? The key, Schmidt replied. Or at least part of it. Look here. He pointed to a section of the encrypted text. This sequence repeats 3 times in the message. In English, certain words are used frequently in military and intelligence communications. Operation, urgent, priority, immediate. I tested each as a potential key, and, he showed his work, using operation as part of the polyalphabetic key, a section of the encrypted message suddenly resolved into clear English text. Mein Gott, Richter breathed. It works, Schmidt confirmed. Now that we have the key structure, I can decrypt the entire message. Give me 2 hours. Richter immediately called Captain Muller, who had retired to officers' quarters in the factory above. Sir, we've broken the cipher. 2 hours and we'll have the complete message. Excellent work, Richter, I'm coming down. Those 2 hours felt longer than the entire preceding day. The team worked feverishly, applying the key to decrypt the full message group by group. As each section was decoded, it was typed on a separate sheet and handed to Richter. What emerged was extraordinary. Part 4. The message. At 23:47 hours on March 17, 1943, the complete decrypted message was assembled. Captain Muller and Lieutenant Richter read it together in Richter's small office. The door closed, the two men sitting across from each other at a metal desk. The message read, "From London Central Coordination to Allied Planning Staff, Washington. Classification, most secret date, 17 March 1943. Industrial output, verification and strategic assessment. Following verification by Joint Chiefs and Treasury Department, confirm current monthly production figures as of February 1943. Aircraft production, United States, 7,400 units per month, all types. United Kingdom, 2,300 units per month, all types. Combined Allied monthly production, 9,700 aircraft. Sherman tank production, United States 2,100 units per month. Additional armored vehicle production, 1,400 units per month. Naval construction, destroyer escorts, 24 per month. Cargo vessels, Liberty ships, 140 per month. Major combatants, 8 and 12 per month. Munitions, small arms ammunition, 3.2 billion rounds per month. Artillery shells, all calibers, 8 million rounds per month. Strategic assessment, current production rates exceed all initial planning estimates. Industrial mobilization proceeding ahead of schedule. Atlantic convoy losses declining due to increased destroyer escort production and improved anti-submarine tactics. Based on current trajectories, Allied material superiority over Axis powers will reach overwhelming proportions by late 1943. German industrial base cannot match combined Allied output, even at theoretical maximum capacity. Recommendation: continue current production emphasis. Accelerate training programs to match equipment availability. Plan major offensive operations for 1944 with confidence in material availability. Churchill has been informed. Roosevelt concurs with assessment. End message. Muller finished reading and slowly set down the paper. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, these numbers, are they possible? Richter had been asking himself the same question. I've been analyzing that, sir. Based on intelligence reports we've received over the past year, these figures are plausible. The Americans have mobilized their entire industrial economy. The British, despite being bombed, have dispersed their production and maintained output. But 9,700 aircraft per month. Muller's voice held disbelief. That's more than we produce in a year. I know, sir. And 2,000 Sherman tanks per month? We produce perhaps 400 Panthers and Tigers combined. I know, sir. Muller stood abruptly, pacing the small office. This could be disinformation, a planted message designed to demoralize us. That was my first thought, Richter admitted. But consider, this was a transmission from London to Washington using high-grade encryption. They had no reason to believe we could intercept it, much less decrypt it. Why plant false information in your own secure channels? To feed it to us if we did intercept it, Muller argued, but his voice lacked conviction. Then why use encryption they believed unbreakable? If they wanted us to read it, they would make it easier. No, sir, I believe this message is genuine. They were reporting actual production figures to their military planners. Muller sat back down heavily. If these numbers are real, then the war is lost. Richter finished quietly. At least from a material standpoint, we cannot win a production race against an opponent manufacturing 10 times our output. The two men sat in silence, the weight of this realization settling over them. Both were experienced officers. Both understood the mathematics of warfare. Tactics and courage could achieve much, but ultimately, industrial capacity determined outcomes in modern war. Germany had entered the war with technological advantages and well-trained forces. But if the Allies could replace losses 10 times faster than Germany, those advantages would erode rapidly. Every plane Germany shot down would be replaced by 10. Every tank destroyed would be replaced by 5. It was, quite simply, mathematically impossible for Germany to win. Thutter, Chapter 2, The Verification. Part 5, Seeking Confirmation. Captain Muller departed Station Belgian 7 at 0300 hours on March 18th, carrying the decrypted message to present to his superiors at Abwehr headquarters in Brussels. He left Richter with explicit instructions. Verify these numbers through any means available. Richter spent the remainder of that night planning his verification strategy. The question wasn't whether the Allies were producing large quantities of equipment. German intelligence already knew they were. The question was scale. Were these staggering numbers accurate? He had several sources to check against. First, intelligence reports from agents in neutral countries. German spies in Sweden, Switzerland, and Turkey often obtained industrial and economic data from Allied sources. If American and British production was truly this massive, there would be corroborating evidence. Second, intercepted Allied communications. While this single high-grade encrypted message was unusual, the Allies transmitted thousands of lower-level communications daily. Production numbers should appear in logistics communications, supply requests, and unit equipment reports. Third, photographic reconnaissance. Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights over Britain, though increasingly dangerous due to RAF defenses, occasionally captured images of factories and ports. Those images might show the scale of production facilities. By Oro 700 hours, Richter had his team divided into 3 groups, each pursuing one line of verification. He personally took charge of reviewing intelligence reports from neutral countries. What he found was disturbing. A report from a German agent in Stockholm, dated February 15, 1943, described conversations with a Swedish industrialist who had recently visited the United States. The industrialist reported, "American factories working 24 hours daily, producing war material in quantities I could scarcely credit. The Ford Motor Company alone is producing more aircraft engines monthly than all of German industry combined." Another report from Bern, Switzerland quoted American trade publications, legally available in neutral Switzerland, describing unprecedented industrial expansion. The article cited specific factories: Boeing's Seattle plant employing 30,000 workers producing B-17 bombers, the Willow Run facility producing 1 B-24 bomber per hour. 1 bomber per hour. That single factory matched Germany's entire heavy bomber production. A Turkish intelligence source reported British production data obtained from shipping manifests. In January 1943 alone, Britain had shipped to the Soviet Union 300 tanks, 200 aircraft, 4,000 trucks, and 25,000 tons of ammunition. And this was material Britain felt it could spare while maintaining its own forces. Each report, individually, could be questioned. Taken together, they painted a consistent picture. The production numbers in the intercepted message were not only plausible, but conservative. Part 6. The Luftwaffe's Grim Numbers. Oberleutnant Hans Vogel was tasked with analyzing intercepted Allied radio communications for any references to production or equipment availability. He worked methodically through hundreds of transcripts, marking anything relevant. By midday on March 18th, he had compiled a sobering report for Richter. "Sir," Vogel presented his findings in the bunker's briefing room, "I've reviewed 3 months of Allied tactical communications, mostly British and American bomber groups operating over the continent. The pattern is unmistakable." He displayed several transcripts on the table. January 15th, British bomber group reports losing 8 aircraft in raid on Essen. 5 days later, the same group reports full strength restored, 8 replacement aircraft received. February 3rd, American bomber group loses 12 B-17s in raid on Wilhelmshaven. 10 days later, full strength restored. March 8th, RAF Coastal Command reports losing 3 patrol aircraft to U-boats. 48 hours later, all losses replaced. Vogel looked at Richter. "The replacement rate is extraordinary, sir. We know from our own Luftwaffe reports that German bomber groups can take months to replace losses. The Allies are replacing theirs in days." "What about the Americans specifically?" Richter asked. "Their bomber offensive is relatively new. Are they sustaining losses?" "Oh yes, sir. Significant losses. The February raid on Schweinfurt cost them 23 bombers. But by early March, all replacements had arrived. They're absorbing losses that would cripple our Luftwaffe and simply replacing everything." Richter made notes. This aligns with the production figures in the intercept. If they're producing 9,700 aircraft monthly, losing 100 or 200 in combat operations is acceptable. They simply build more. "There's something else, sir," Vogel added hesitantly. "The quality of replacement aircraft. Our pilots report that Allied aircraft are showing up with newer modifications and improvements. They're not just replacing losses, they're upgrading designs while maintaining production volume. We can barely keep our production lines running with current designs, but they're continuously improving while producing more." It was another piece of evidence supporting the intercepted message's authenticity. Part 7. Eyes from Above. Sergeant Ernst Bauer handled the photographic reconnaissance analysis. This was challenging because Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights over Britain had become increasingly rare by 1943. RAF fighters and anti-aircraft defenses made such flights extraordinarily dangerous, and the Luftwaffe's reconnaissance units were being depleted faster than they could be replaced. But some photos existed, and Bauer reviewed every image from British targets taken in the past 6 months. What he found reinforced the disturbing pattern. Photos of the Midlands industrial region showed factory expansions. Buildings that had been small facilities in 1941 now sprawled across acres. Parking lots surrounding factories were packed with vehicles, indicating multiple shifts of workers. Port facilities showed massive activity. A single photo of Liverpool's docks revealed 14 cargo vessels in various stages of loading or unloading. An analyst's note estimated that Liverpool alone was handling more cargo monthly than all German ports combined. Most telling were photos of American facilities in Britain. The Americans had begun arriving in force in 1942, and by early 1943, they were building extensive infrastructure. One reconnaissance photo of East Anglia showed an American bomber base under construction. The analyst had counted 47 heavy bombers parked on hardstands, with additional hardstands being built for 30 more. 77 heavy bombers at a single base, and intelligence indicated the Americans were building dozens of such bases. Bauer compiled his findings and presented them to Richter with a simple conclusion. Sir, photographic evidence supports massive Allied industrial output. The infrastructure we're seeing, the port capacity, the factory expansions, the military base construction, all suggests they're producing and transporting war material on a scale we cannot match. Part 8. The Grim Mathematics. By evening on March 18th, Richter had all 3 verification reports. He sat alone in his office, reading through each carefully, making calculations on a notepad. The mathematics were straightforward and terrifying. If the Allies were producing 9,700 aircraft monthly, that was 116,400 per year. Germany's total production for 1942 had been approximately 15,000 aircraft. Even if Germany could double its production, unlikely given bombing damage and resource constraints, the Allies would still outproduce them 8-1. The tank numbers were similar. 2,000 Sherman tanks monthly meant 24,000 per year from the United States alone, not counting British and Canadian production. Germany had produced fewer than 6,000 tanks total in 1942. The naval numbers were almost absurd. 140 cargo vessels per month? That meant the Allies were replacing U-boat sinkings faster than U-boats could sink them. The Battle of the Atlantic, which the Kriegsmarine believed it was winning, was actually already lost. The Americans were building Liberty ships faster than Germany could destroy them. Richter put down his pencil and rubbed his eyes. The implications were staggering. Germany had entered the war believing in qualitative superiority. German tanks were better than Allied tanks. German aircraft were better engineered. German soldiers were better trained. All of this was arguably true. But quantity, it turned out, had a quality all its own. A Tiger tank might be superior to a Sherman in direct combat. But if 10 Shermans were produced for every Tiger, the Tigers would be overwhelmed. A FW-190 might outperform a P-47 in a dogfight, but if 3 P-47s were produced for every FW-190, the outcome was inevitable. The intercept Seidler message, Richter realized, was perhaps the most important intelligence Germany had received in the entire war. Not because it revealed Allied weakness, but because it revealed Allied overwhelming strength. And the terrifying part? The message indicated production was accelerating. The figures from February 1943 were described as ahead of schedule, which meant they would continue increasing. By late 1943, the message predicted Allied material superiority would be overwhelming. Richter believed it. The mathematics were irrefutable. Chapter 3. The Aftermath. Part 9. Berlin's Response. Captain Müller returned to Station Belgian 7 on March 20th. 2 days after taking the message to Brussels. He looked exhausted, his uniform rumpled, his face drawn. I've been in constant meetings, he told Richter immediately. Brussels, then Berlin. The message has been seen at the highest levels. What was the response? Richter asked. Müller sat heavily in a chair. Mixed. Some refused to believe the numbers, called it disinformation. Others, he paused. Others were disturbed, very disturbed. Was it forwarded to the OKW? Richter asked, referring to the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, the High Command. Yes, and that's where things became complicated. Mueller looked around to ensure they were alone. Richter, what I'm about to tell you is highly classified. You understand? Of course, sir. The message was presented to General Jodl and eventually to the Führer himself. The response was, not what I expected. What happened? Mueller seemed to choose his words carefully. The Führer rejected the intelligence as British deception. He stated that German willpower and superior tactics would overcome any material advantage. He pointed to our victories in 1940 and 1941 as proof that German forces could defeat numerically superior enemies. Richter felt his stomach sink. But sir, those victories were achieved with material parity, or even superiority. In 1940, we had more tanks than France. In 1941, we had tactical surprise against the Soviets. This is different. We're talking about 10-to-1 disadvantages. I know that, Mueller said sharply. You know that. Several generals know that. But the decision has been made. Official response is that the intelligence is unreliable, and the war will be prosecuted aggressively as planned. That's insane, Richter said before he could stop himself. Mueller stood abruptly. Watch your tongue, Lieutenant. Comments like that could be interpreted as defeatism. Sir, I'm not being defeatist. I'm being realistic. If these production numbers are accurate, and all our verification suggests they are, then Germany needs to reassess its strategic position immediately. Continuing the war under current strategy is pointless. Pointless? Mueller's voice rose. You're suggesting surrender? I'm suggesting negotiation, Richter replied. While Germany still holds territory and has leverage, while our military is still intact, before Allied production superiority becomes absolutely overwhelming. Mueller walked to the door, then turned back. Richter, you're an intelligent man, probably the smartest officer I've worked with. But you need to understand something. Decisions about war and peace are not made by lieutenants analyzing numbers in basement bunkers. They're made by leaders considering factors beyond mere production statistics. What factors could possibly override this mathematics? Richter asked. Will, Mueller replied. Determination, national spirit, the unwillingness to accept defeat. He paused. And perhaps the belief that while material might favor the Allies, time and other factors might favor us. What other factors? New weapons, jets, rockets, U-boats with enhanced capabilities, technological breakthroughs that could offset numerical disadvantages. Richter wanted to argue that technology couldn't overcome 10-to-1 production disadvantages, but he could see the discussion was over. What are my orders regarding the intercept? He asked instead. Continue normal operations. The Siedler intercept is filed and being reviewed by strategic analysis. Your excellent work has been noted. Mueller opened the door. But Richter, a word of advice. Keep your opinions about strategic matters to yourself. Focus on your job. Let others worry about the big picture. After Mueller left, Richter sat alone, the intercepted message still on his desk. He read it again, and the numbers seemed to mock him. 9,700 aircraft per month, 2,000 tanks per month, 140 ships per month. Germany had intercepted perhaps the most important intelligence of the war, and the response was to ignore it. Part 10. Whispers in the Ranks. In the days following Mueller's visit, something changed at Station Belgian 7. Richter couldn't pinpoint it exactly, but there was a different atmosphere. The routine work continued, monitoring Allied transmissions, attempting decryptions, filing reports. But underneath, there were whispers. The Siedler intercept had been classified, but classification couldn't stop people from talking. The cryptanalysis team knew what they had decoded. They had seen the numbers. And while most didn't fully grasp the implications, some did. Dr. Wilhelm Schmidt, the elderly linguistic consultant, approached Richter one evening after most of the day shift had departed. Herr Leutnant, might I speak with you privately? They went to Richter's office. Schmidt closed the door carefully and sat down, his aged frame settling with a sigh. I am an old man, Schmidt began without preamble. I remember the last war. I served in it, though not as a soldier. I was a translator attached to diplomatic services. I saw how that war ended, not dramatically with battles, but gradually as Germany was simply worn down by blockade and attrition. Dr. Schmidt, if this is about the intercept, of course it's about the intercept, Schmidt interrupted gently. That message, Lieutenant, showed me that history is repeating itself. Once again, Germany has entered a war it cannot win through attrition. Once again, our enemies have superior industrial resources. The official position is that the intelligence is unreliable, Richter said carefully. The official position is wrong, Schmidt replied bluntly. I have decoded enough Allied messages to know authentic ones from forgeries. That message was real. Those numbers are real. And they mean what you think they mean. Richter said nothing. I have a son, Schmidt continued. He's 19, currently serving on the Eastern Front with an infantry regiment. When I decoded that message and understood what it meant, my first thought was, how long until the mathematics catch up? How long before Allied material superiority overwhelms our forces, and my son is caught in the collapse? Dr. Schmidt, I'm not defeatist, Lieutenant. I'm not disloyal. I love Germany. I want us to survive this war. But survival requires acknowledging reality. And the reality is that we are on the wrong side of an industrial war we cannot win. What would you have me do? Richter asked quietly. I don't know, Schmidt admitted. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps simply continue doing your job and hope that someone in power eventually listens. But I wanted you to know that you're not alone in understanding what that message truly meant. Others see it too. We're just powerless to act on that understanding. After Schmidt left, Richter sat thinking about that conversation. How many others in Germany's military understood the truth? How many officers looked at intelligence reports and realized the mathematics didn't work? How many soldiers on the front lines watched Allied equipment arriving in overwhelming quantities and drew their own conclusions? And more troubling, did it matter? Could individual understanding change the trajectory of a nation at war? Part 11. Watching it unfold. Over the following months, Richter and his team at Station Belgian 7 continued their work. They intercepted Allied communications, attempted decryptions, filed reports. But now Richter saw everything through the lens of the Siedler intercept. In April 1943, they intercepted Allied communications about a bomber raid on the Ruhr. Richter noted, 800 bombers participated. Such a raid would have been impossible for Germany, which couldn't field 800 bombers on the entire Western Front. Yet the Allies were treating it as routine. In May, Allied communications mentioned losing 150 aircraft in a single month of operations. Within weeks, all were replaced. The replacement rate matched the production figures from the intercept. In June, reconnaissance photos showed American forces in Britain had grown substantially. Bases that held 50 bombers in March now housed 100. New bases were opening monthly. In July, Allied communications began discussing operations for 1944. The tone was confident, assured. Plans were being made on the assumption of unlimited equipment availability. Each piece of intelligence confirmed the Siedler message. The Allies were producing exactly what they said they were producing. Their industrial mobilization was proceeding exactly as planned. By late 1943, as the message predicted, Allied material superiority was becoming overwhelming. Richter documented all of this in his reports. He filed them through proper channels. But he never received indication that anyone at higher levels was taking the implications seriously. In September 1943, Italy surrendered. Richter wasn't surprised. Italy had never possessed industrial capacity to sustain a modern war. Its departure from the Axis was inevitable once Allied pressure became severe. But it was one more sign that the mathematics were catching up. Bucker Part 12. The beginning of the end. By December 1943, 9 months after intercepting the Siedler message, Richter noticed American communications had changed tone. Earlier in the year, American transmissions had been cautious, careful, often discussing shortages or delays. By December, the Americans communicated with absolute confidence. An intercepted message from December 10th casually mentioned, additional tank battalion being formed ahead of schedule. Equipment available from current production overflow. Overflow production. The Americans had so many tanks being manufactured that they had excess beyond planning requirements. Another intercept. Air Command reports satisfaction with replacement rates. Current projections suggest sufficient aircraft availability for expanded operations in spring. They weren't just matching losses. They were planning expanded operations because they had more planes than they needed. The final crushing confirmation came on December 23rd, when Station Belgian 7 intercepted a communication from Allied headquarters discussing 1944 planning. The message casually referenced Second Front preparations and equipment stockpiles sufficient for sustained operations. The invasion. It was coming, and they had the equipment to sustain it. Richter submitted his report on the December intercepts, including his assessment. Allied communications indicate massive material stockpiles in Britain. Equipment availability no longer a constraint on Allied planning. They are now limited only by time needed to train personnel to use all available equipment. Think about that. The Allies had so much equipment that their constraint was training people to use it all. 3 days later, Captain Muller called Richter to Brussels. "The Russians have been pushing back on the Eastern Front," Muller said without preamble when Richter arrived. "Our forces are retreating across multiple sectors." "I know, sir. We've been monitoring Allied communications celebrating Soviet advances. The Allies are coordinating," Muller continued. "The Soviets attack from the east, wearing down our forces. Meanwhile, the Americans and British build up in Britain for invasion from the west. It's a strategic vice." "Yes, sir. And we don't have the resources to defend both fronts adequately. Not against the numbers they're fielding." Muller looked at Richter with something approaching resignation. "That message you intercepted in March, the production numbers, they were accurate, weren't they?" "Yes, sir. All our verification confirmed it, and our leadership's response was to ignore it." Muller laughed bitterly. "We had the intelligence. We knew what was coming, but we did nothing." "What should we have done, sir?" Muller was quiet for a long moment. "Negotiated, while we had leverage, while our armies still held territory, before Allied production superiority became absolute." He shook his head. "But that decision wasn't ours to make." "Is it too late now? For negotiation?" "Probably. The Allies have grown strong enough that they believe they can dictate terms rather than negotiate. They're demanding unconditional surrender. Nothing less." Richter absorbed this. The intercepted message from March had predicted Allied material superiority would be overwhelming by late 1943. That prediction had been exact, and now Germany was facing exactly the situation the message had implied: an enemy so strong that negotiation was no longer possible. The mathematics had caught up. The Revere, Epilogue, Aftermath Station. Belgian 7 continued operations until September 1944, when Allied forces overran Belgium following the Normandy invasion. Lieutenant Klaus Richter and most of his staff were captured by advancing American troops. Richter spent the remainder of the war in a POW camp in England. After the war, he returned to Germany and resumed his academic career at Heidelberg, teaching mathematics until his retirement in 1968. He rarely spoke about his wartime service, but in a 1965 interview with a military historian, he mentioned the Seidler intercept. "We knew," Richter said in that interview. "By March 1943, we had definitive intelligence about Allied industrial capacity. We knew the scale of what was arrayed against us, but knowing and accepting are different things. Germany's leadership couldn't accept that the war was unwinnable, so they proceeded as if will could overcome mathematics. It couldn't. Dr. Wilhelm Schmidt survived the war. His son did not, killed in action on the Eastern Front in January 1944. Schmidt never returned to academic work, living quietly in Berlin until his death in 1957. Captain Heinrich Müller was killed in April 1945 during the final defense of Berlin. His superiors noted in his file that he had fought courageously to the end, never wavering in his commitment to the Reich. Whether he still believed in victory or simply saw no other option is unknown. The Seidler intercept itself survived. After the war, Allied intelligence officers found the file in captured German archives. They were initially puzzled by it. The message was an Allied communication, but the Germans had somehow intercepted and decoded it. Analysis by British and American cryptographers revealed that the Germans had broken a cipher that Allied services had believed was secure. This led to immediate changes in Allied cryptographic procedures, even after the war ended. The production numbers in the message, they were accurate. American military-industrial production from 1940 to 1945 exceeded even the staggering figures the Germans intercepted. By 1944, American factories alone were producing more war material than all Axis powers combined. The intercept had been right. The war was mathematically lost by March 1943. Everything that followed, the continuing battles, the millions of additional deaths, the destruction of German cities, was simply the working out of an equation that had already been solved. Some historians argue that Germany's leadership knew this, but continued fighting anyway, hoping for a miracle or a political split among the Allies. Others suggest they genuinely believed German determination could overcome material disadvantages. But those who actually saw the intelligence, who broke the codes and read the messages and understood the mathematics, people like Klaus Richter, knew the truth much earlier. They knew in March 1943, when they decrypted a routine Allied message reporting production figures. They knew the war was lost the day they intercepted Operation Seidler. Historical note: this story is based on real events but dramatized for narrative purposes. German signals intelligence did intercept numerous Allied communications during Wende, and the Germans did break some Allied codes. While the specific Operation Siedler message is fictionalized, the production numbers and strategic situation described are historically accurate. By 1943, Allied industrial production, particularly American, had reached extraordinary levels that Germany could not match. Multiple German officers and analysts recognized this reality, but Germany's strategic decision-making did not adjust accordingly. The mathematical imbalance described in this story was real, and it did determine the war's outcome. Many Germans in intelligence and analysis roles understood the strategic situation long before the general public or even frontline military units. Their inability to change policy despite having accurate intelligence represents one of the tragic ironies of the war. The lesson, perhaps. In warfare, acknowledging unpleasant truths is often more important than maintaining morale. Germany knew it was losing by 1943, but couldn't accept that knowledge. Hundreds of thousands died in the time between knowing and accepting. Did this story open your eyes? If this untold World War II intelligence story fascinated you, subscribe for more hidden history, hit like, and share with history buffs. Comment. What other Wubby intelligence operations should we cover? Turn on notifications for more incredible true stories.